If anybody does. All right,
Yep.
I'll give you a countdown. You ready?
Sounds good.
Five, four, three. Hey everybody, James Floyd Kelly here. I'm here with Erik Wecks again, and welcome to another episode. I think it's episode 8 of Novel
Episode
Idea.
8.
Episode
Yes.
Today we're going to talk about something that is very important to Erik. It's starting to become important to me because he put me onto it. It's something called 15 Beats, right, Erik?
Yep. It's from a book called "To Save the Cat" by Blake Snyder.
Okay, I may let you explain that. I have looked at the 15 Beats. I've read them, and they're pretty self-explanatory. But what I want to get into in this video is, I know what kind of writing I do. I know you know what kind of writing you do. It seems like a lot of the 15. Some of them may not necessarily apply to me.
Okay.
I mean, they all do, sort
Okay.
of. But I'm curious to get a better explanation of it from you because you've written a book based.
Sure.
You've used 15 Beats. So why don't I
Yeah.
hand it on to you and let you give the overview of 15 Beats?
Sure. Great. So Blake Snyder wrote a book called "Save the Cat." It is a screenwriting book, and it's probably one of, if not the most influential screenwriting book of the last. Well, I don't know. I actually don't know when it was published. Today, let's just say that it is probably the most influential screenwriting book out there. Now, there's a lot of bad that has come from that screenwriting book, in that Hollywood has become so slavish to the hero's journey and so slavish to 15 Beats that it makes every movie feel the same. So 15 Beats, there's some really good critiques of the 15 Beats out there. There's some, just like there's some great critiques of hero's journey out there. So when I talk about them, I actually think that writers ought to experiment with them. But the 15 Beat structure, understanding it as a writer, is, I think, essential for helping you sort through story problems. So if I were to compare how I think about 15 Beats and other story writing structures, I would compare that to a painter knowing his brushes.
Okay.
Right. So it is about knowing the tools and instruments of your trade, and when you know them, you know how to break them and how to, compensate for having broken one. So I think every writer needs to study screenplay writing, screenplay books, and other things, because I think they provide such a clear understanding of all of the story elements that are traditionally in stories that we read.
Well, that may be my problem right there because when you first put me onto 15 Beats, I just checked it out on the website resources.
Right.
Never read the book, so obviously
Right.
it sounds like what I need to do is to grab a copy of Save the Cat.
I have not read Save the Cat. I'll fess up. I got enough out of it on the 15 Beats and that kind of stuff. But you have to do some exploring, because each website will give you a little bit of a different take on the 15 Beats, and only when you kind of put them together in aggregate do they make sense. The other thing I don't like about some of the explanations is they don't tell you how much of a book is in each beat. So one of the things you don't see is that several beats are often overlaid in the 15 Beats, and we should go through them.
Yeah.
And as we go through them, I'll talk about which ones are overlaid. So there is still in the 15 Beats a 3-act structure. And you'll see it. It'll tell you when you transition to Act 2 and when you transition to Act 3. So in a lot of sense, between those transitions, you're laying beat on top of beat, and you're interlacing them.
Right.
But that doesn't come out often in the explanations.
You mentioned acts, and I'm looking at the beats, and there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. There's 5 that fall in what they call Act 1.
Yes.
Opening image, setup, theme state, catalyst, and debate.
Yep.
The one thing I will admit, the first time I read through the beats, they kind of made me yawn because they're not, at least the first few websites I read, they weren't really, to me, they weren't exciting.
Right.
There were a couple websites where 1 or 2 of them were focused on, and so I got a little more depth and made it a little bit better. But the first one, opening image. Here is the summary of Blake. A visual that represents the struggle and tone of the story. A snapshot of the main character's problem before the adventure begins. So if I understand correctly, what Blake is saying here is that in Act 1, I better answer that picture. The main character, the problem, and set the tone of the story, for example.
So let's go to a classic hero's journey movie. George Lucas is famous for really approving of those 15 beats. And here's where I'm going to defend them. Here's where I want to start defending them. I'm going to argue that we love Star Wars.
Okay.
And we're going to go episode 4. We'll leave out all the junk, right? We'll go to episode 4 in its original format. Han shot first.
Han shot first, all right.
Right? Okay, so that format of that story, we love it right from the very beginning because he gets all these things right. So the opening image, the little tiny ship, lasers, followed by the big ship, and you're like, those are the good guys because the ship was white. These are the bad guys because the ship was gray, and they're way bigger than the good guys. We're rooting for that ship, and we don't even know anything about the story. And that's a classic opening image. Size of ships tells you so much, and who's got the upper hand, and who do we want to win, right? We know all that as soon as we see that first thing. So that's what we're talking about, the power of opening image. In a book, one of the mistakes that so one of the things is the 15 beats I don't think are well named, and I don't think they're well explained.
I agree.
The principles behind them are really important. So like one of the things when you hear opening image is it's really easy to start your opening paragraph of your book, or like I did in Etna, with a kind of low-key situation. And I would argue that for readers, you are going to invest so many hours of your time that within the first page and a half, the readers need to be assured that the writer can build tension. And so I don't think my opening to Etna is my strongest. I actually think the opening to the Far Bank of Rubicon is far better because it just assures the reader that you can build tension and that you can do stuff that way. And then if I want to drop back into a character-driven chapter, which is what I do in Chapter 1 of the Far Bank of the Rubicon, I can.
I will go back to Chapter 1 of Rubicon, and I will back you up that first chapter did set the tone. You knew a war was coming.
Yep.
You knew the two factions. You knew who the bad guy was.
Yep.
So, yeah, okay. I'm going to go along with you there. So let's talk about the next one, which was setup. Expand on the before snapshot. Present the main character's world as it is and what is missing in their life.
Yes. So setup, theme, catalyst, all come in the first few chapters of a book. Again, setup and theme, if we go to Star Wars, are the whole thing with Princess Leia, her capture, that's setup. The droids escaping, that's setup. Introducing the themes of becoming a man.
Yeah, yeah.
I want to go for some star converters at Tashi Star Station or whatever it is. Power converters, that's what it is, right? Yeah. That line, right, is set up. We all, when I saw that in the theater for the second time when they re-released it, we all laughed at that line. But, the more I've stepped back and thought about it, we rip on George Lucas for the way he directed that, but that is actually perfectly directed. Because that is who Luke is. It tells you so much about him being a child, a man-child. He's not grown up. He needs to go on this adventure to become who he is in Return of the Jedi. That is his whole growth path. And the little kid who's stuck on the farm is where he starts.
Good point.
So that's what you're seeing in the theme stated. And then the catalyst, again, to stick with Star Wars, because I think it's really, really easy to see it. Is Obi-Wan Kenobi. The moment of catalyst is, you must come to Alderaan with me and learn the ways of the Force, right? That is a specific call to an adventure. And that's followed up by the next beat, which is the debate. I can't. I have to be at home. I'm going to get killed when I get there. And then the Jawas, and then the dead skeletons, and he suddenly chooses the adventure. Okay, and that's when you start doing that, where the 50 beats start making sense to me is when I start plugging stories that I love into these, right? Dune, you could do the exact same beats, right? The opening image of sticking your hand in the box, right? The setup of having to move to this planet that we don't like. The themes of water and spice and control and power politics, all of those, the threats of assassination, all that's there. The catalyst, the attack and the assassination of Dad, right?
Well,
the debate.
let me ask you this question, because given that you have the 15 beats and it's like an outline. You could call it an outline.
Yes. Yeah.
Is there anything wrong, or did you do this? Is there anything wrong with using the beat sheet sort of as a cheat sheet to say, this is how I'm going to plot my story?
I use it every time.
Okay.
Every time. On purpose. And this is where understanding the percentage that each one of these beats takes in a book is important, because they're not all equal. So, for instance, when you move into the B story and the promise of the premise in Act 2, those are very layered on top of each other stuff, right? They're layered on top of each other. But the B story and the promise of the premise will take up a good portion of your book. And this is where I think a lot of I think this is where a lot of stories fall down. And this is where I want to argue with the beat sheet a little bit. Right? If you look at the beat sheet, Act 3 doesn't start until well after the midpoint. Okay.
Yeah.
Which means you're not really wrapping things up until well later in the story. And whether we want to call this a 4-act, my thinking is a 4-act thinking. I don't quite think so. I think it's still a 3-act thinking. But I actually really feel like I want to start Act 3
at the midpoint.
At the midpoint.
Yeah, I almost agree with that, because reading it and comparing it to, say, Star Wars, if you plotted Star Wars to this particular outline, it would be the last, it would be Luke going down the trench, and that's where Act 3 starts. That's the finale of the movie.
Act 3, I think, technically starts in Star Wars when they escape the Death Star.
Right, I agree.
So it's that moment of, but if you actually look at it, the long dark night of the soul actually does happen there. Right? So that's Luke mourning.
Yes.
Luke mourning Obi-Wan's death.
Obi-Wan's dead. Right.
The break into Act 3 is, come on, we got to destroy some TIE fighters. That's the break into Act 3. The music changes and tells you that you're in Act 3.
A little restructuring of the 15 beats, you could follow Star Wars easily.
Yeah, and really this is about a writer's thinking. Like, one of the problems with the 15 beats is it can lead you to miss it could lead you to make several mistakes. One of the mistakes I think is that the B story, which is usually the love story, in my books it certainly is, doesn't usually take off until Act 2.
Okay.
I think there's some good arguments out there that the themes and the emotional content of the story have to start in Act 1. You have to introduce those themes in Act 1. Also, if you're following a 3-act structure and you're reading this, it could seem like Act 2 is the boring act, right?
Well,
and that's a problem. I think it's a major problem in our writing. I think a lot of the middle of books, nothing happens.
Well, you got to remember,
way too many books.
To go back to your Star Wars analogy, Lucas originally was going to have Luke and Leia as the love story. It was only fans liked Han, so he decided to make Han the love interest. So technically, the love story did begin. It began when Luke jimmied the hologram, saw Leia, and he fell in love with her. But fortunately, fortunately, it didn't work out that way.
Well, but not really, fortunately, because he went way too far down that road for my comfort. Thank you.
Yeah, that's true, because Luke and Leia did have that little kiss in Empire, so yeah. Yeah, you know what? We should. We're almost out of time, but we really should pick up on 15 beats again.
Yeah, I think we should do that. We may need to do several of them.
I don't know if viewers are going to like it, but I absolutely loved you ripping down Star Wars and comparing it to those. Because all of a sudden I'm like, oh, wow.
Yeah, and okay. So why is this important? This is actually important because this is the way you problem solve stories. So if you wrote yourself into a corner and you can't figure out how to get out, I strongly advise that readers pick up a copy of the 15 beats. Grab a copy of the 15 beats. At that point, writers need to take a look at, how did I get in this corner, and where am I violating these, and what is it that I want to do that I've kind of turned upside down. So a great example from my most recent book, The Far Bank of the Rubicon, is the first act promises a build-up to war.
Yep.
And I've said this before on this broadcast, right? It promised to build up to war, and I tried to deliver a romance second act because that's what I'm supposed to do according to the 15 beats.
Yep.
But by someone, by getting some really good challenges that no, you can't do a romance second act because you promised me a build up to war and you're not delivering that. That really helped me sort out that I had to integrate those two somehow, and I had to find a means to actually make them work together.
And it worked. It worked. I would not have bought your romance between two characters in Rubicon if you had pushed it too far back. It needed to happen early when you.
It needed to happen early, and then I think you wouldn't have bought it if I had emphasized it. Right. The other reason it works is because I told you this is a war story at its heart, and that's what I'm advertising.
Well, and also it took you a number of chapters because the girl aged over a period. There were a number of jumps where her age jumped, so it wasn't like they fell in love in 2 months.
Right.
You were given there were actually 2 jumps, significant time jumps that allowed you to bring those characters back in and show that they had stayed in communication. They were reaching an age where they weren't 12 and 16 anymore.
Right.
So yeah, it was well done. By the way, readers, I have finished on the far back of the Rubicon. I'm hoping to post a review on geekdad.com. Erik will probably link to it, but I have to tell you, I finished it. It was outstanding, and I told Erik that if there was any doubt about Erik's ability to write well and to plot a good science fiction, and not just science fiction, but just plot a good story. I told him his writing and his stories are as good or better than anything I could pick up in the bookstore, and I stand by that. Rubicon is excellent. If you haven't read Etna, read Etna, then start Rubicon, and then Erik, let's wrap this up with this.
Yep.
Rubicon, and then book 2 in your Pax Imperium trilogy is called
Athena's Revenge.
Athena's Revenge. So take that title however you want, viewers. But seriously, if you've read anything of Erik's and you liked it and you haven't read Rubicon, it's good. It's really good. Erik, I promise you I'm going to get a review written up soon. I'm doing Amazon as well. But I was very happy with it. I told you that when I reached the end, I actually did the Darth Vader no.
Excellent.
But it was a good no. It was, I want more. So you know what? Stop talking to me, Erik, and get to your laptop and get working on story number 2.
You know what I am doing? I am doing this, right?
Yes.
I have my pen, and actually I wanted to do this today, James. This is your copy. So
cool.
I am signing that as we speak, and it will be packaged and shipped before the day is over.
Thank you, Erik. I appreciate it.
Yeah.
Great book. Listen, viewers, we're going to be back again next week. Vacations are over. Summer's over. Erik and I are back on a somewhat regular work schedule. So we'll be back next week with episode 9. Don't know what we're going to talk about, but I tell you what, Erik, we'll talk offline and we'll figure out what we're going to talk about.
Let's do it.
Viewers, if you have any questions, please. Jim, thanks.
So there it is.
Got it. I'm going to keep it in a bag. I'm going to put it in a temperature-controlled room, and in maybe 300 to 400 years, they'll use it as a history book of what what the Empire should do or not do.
You're making me laugh because I can't wait for you to read the opening of my next novel that I'm writing with my daughter. So I have a YA superhero origin story called Gossamer. Good
for you. Good for her. How old is your daughter?
She's 14, and so Dad finally cleared his summer schedule. I got the nonfiction book out of the way yesterday, so I have about a week and a half to work on this with her. We're going to put out about a 50 to 60,000 word YA novel. Hopefully by the end of September we'll have a draft done.
Can't wait to read it. Maybe we'll get her on the show sometime.
Yeah, that would be fun. That would be fun.
All right. Well, listen, viewers, thanks for joining us. We probably went up, Erik. We probably got 7 or 8 people watching this now.
Woohoo!
Maybe 100. You've got a lot of new readers.
There you go. We'll see what happens.
But you know what? We want to hear from you. So send in your questions or suggestions for what you'd like Erik to talk about on future episodes, and we'll try to guide the show in that direction. I'm James Floyd Kelly. This is Erik Wecks. And Erik, I'll see you next week, okay?
See you next week. Talk to you soon.
Bye.
Bye.